Apparently, the governor of New Mexico is under the weird misimpression that the Constitution does not apply in New Mexico. New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham has now announced that she has issued an emergency order suspending the right to carry firearms in public across Albuquerque and the surrounding county for at least 30 days in response to a spate of gun violence. This is according to the Associated Press. She said she expects legal challenges, but she was compelled to act because of recent shootings, including the death of an 11-year-old boy outside a minor league baseball stadium this week. Lieutenant Grisham said state police would be responsible for enforcing what amount to civil violations. But the Albuquerque police chief, he's already saying, like, I'm not going to enforce that. Like, this is unconstitutional. Here's the New Mexico governor claiming that emergency powers give her the ability to simply suspend constitutional law.
You took an oath to the Constitution. Isn't it unconstitutional to say you cannot exercise your carry license?
With one exception, and that is if there's an emergency, and I've declared an emergency for a temporary amount of time, I can invoke additional powers. No constitutional right, in my view, including my oath, is intended to be absolute. There are restrictions on free speech. There are restrictions on my freedoms. In this emergency, this 11-year-old and all these parents who have lost all these children, they deserve my attention to have the debate about whether or not in an emergency we can create a safer environment. Because what about their constitutional rights?
So this is, when people say political fascism, this would be it. Okay, when a member of the government simply declares via emergency order that they can violate willy-nilly constitutional rights, like full-scale constitutional rights, based on no actual emergency. Okay, we're not talking here about a tornado is hitting the state. We're not talking here about there's some sort of giant earthquake. There's no emergency here. This is just her saying, I don't like that people got shot, therefore I'm banning you from exercising your constitutional rights. You could do this for anything. And she could say, listen, we have a national epidemic of hate. You've seen this, by the way, in places like Chicago, where the former mayor, Lori Lightfoot, tried to declare that racism was a public health emergency. You could see somebody like this idiot governor saying, racism, hate, they're a public health emergency, and I'm declaring an emergency. Therefore, you are not allowed to say the following words in my state, and then just list them off. That'd be a pretty significant First Amendment violation. Or she could go even further, presumably. She could just say, you're not allowed to use the internet, because the internet obviously has facilitated so much violence. So you're just not allowed to use it anymore. I've decided in my state that you're not allowed to use that, not on the basis of any sort of elected legislative session, but on the basis of her own judgment that an emergency has now been constituted because she doesn't like the thing that's happening. Well, if all of your rights are simply dependent on one lady deciding that she really doesn't like the things that are happening in the world, that is tyranny. That is the essence of tyranny. And it's amazing that she would try this, but it was always going to happen. I mean, the minute that we shut down everything in the world for COVID, and then we maintained that for 2 years, even as the data emerged that it actually wasn't the sort of national emergency that was being suggested, it was only a matter of time before Democratic officials tried to do something like this. It really was. By the way, I'm going to say something I almost never say, which is points to Ted Lieu. Ted Lieu, I mean, again, credit where credit is due. Ted Lieu said, I support gun safety laws. However, this order from the governor of New Mexico violates the U.S. Constitution. No state in the union can suspend the federal Constitution. There's no such thing as a state public health emergency exception to the United States Constitution. Well, I mean, that's a welcome change. And then even David Hogg, who is one of the world's larger idiots and got into Harvard University on the basis of his movement about gun control, even David Hogg, who's been wrong about nearly everything ever, he says, I support gun safety, but there is no such thing as a state public health emergency exception to the U.S. Constitution. Good. I mean, like, I'm glad that they're starting to realize that. Now we'll see how broadly they apply it. Because again, if this is the new way that Democrats make law, then you could do it on the basis of anything, right? Joe Biden and the rest of the Democrats have declared that climate change is the greatest emergency facing humanity, period. It's greater than COVID, than nuclear war, than anything. The greatest emergency facing humanity is, according to them, that the planet is getting warmer by a few degrees. And thus, what couldn't they justify in the name of all of this? Well, the New Mexican governor, Lujan Grisham, she is saying that violators could face civil penalties and a fine of up to $5,000. Under the order, residents can still transport guns to some private locations like a gun range or a gun store, but the firearm has to have a trigger lock or some other container or mechanism, making it impossible to discharge. There's no way this remotely stands up in court. There's just no way. It It remains amazing to me that the same people who declare that rule of law is deeply important to them, many of them are going to ignore this and look the other way and pretend that it doesn't matter. That January 6th was an assault on the rule of law, that it overthrew constitutional norms. Well, I mean, how about just ignoring the Constitution entirely, as the New Mexican governor is doing? How often do you pray? Well, the answer is probably not often enough. So I'm an Orthodox Jew. That means that I pray 3 times a day. When it comes to the big holidays coming up, it's going to be more than 3 times a day. Honestly, without the prayer, my day would be pretty unlivable because you need to commune with the divine to give you a sense of purpose, to give you a sense of comfort and all the rest. Well, if you're having a hard time with that, or regardless of your religious practice, if you actually want to make it better, well, Hallow can help you. Hallow is an incredible app that offers a unique approach to prayer and meditation. Unlike other meditation apps, Hallow is tailored specifically for people of faith to deepen their relationship with God. The Hallow app is filled with studies, meditations, reflections rooted in Judeo-Christian prayer practices. A lot of our Christian employees use Hallow regularly. You can pray alongside Mark Wahlberg, Jonathan Rumi, who portrays Jesus in The Chosen, even some world-class athletes. You can access the #1 Christian podcast, Bible in a Year, with Father Mike Schmitz on Hallow. With features like progress tracking and streaks, Hallow will help you stay motivated and make prayer a regular part of your daily routine. Set prayer reminders. Invite others to pray with you. Track your progress along the way. If you're looking to deepen your relationship with God and improve your mental and emotional well-being, try Hallow for 3 months free at hallow.com/Shapiro. That's hallow.com/Shapiro. Donald Trump was in Iowa, back to the horse race. So Donald Trump was over in Iowa over the weekend. So was Ron DeSantis. And it was sort of mixed reactions, I would say. So Trump visited an Iowa frat. The frat was naturally quite warm to him. Here's some of the video. Got some excited college students over there for him.
Hey, how you doing, President Trump?
I'm doing good.
Now
What do you think about this? What are the students here?
This is some turnout. I guess the youth likes Trump, but we love Iowa. We just left South Dakota last night. It was an amazing evening. We got a wonderful endorsement, as you know, from the governor, and we're here, and this reception's been incredible.
He's going to go over to the maybe the barbecue pit, throw a couple burgers on it, looks like. I don't know if, Corey, if you got a good shot of that. That's a nice one.
Wow. Okay. Trump doing some retail politics, which, good for him. He also went to the Iowa football game, and there was a bit of online controversy that broke out over whether he was being booed or whether he was being cheered. So here's sort of the raw footage. And as you will hear, the answer is some of both. You can hear, people. This is when he went down into the stands. He spent most of the game not in the stands. He was in sort of a luxury box. People were flipping him off and all the rest of it. But you can see there are a bunch of enthusiastic people there in Iowa as well, which of course is not a shock. He did win Iowa in the last election cycle. The latest polls from Iowa are showing Trump up big time. The Iowa State Civics poll that was released just a few days ago has Trump up 37 points over the rest of the field. The NBC News Des Moines Register poll has Trump up 23 points over the rest of the field in Iowa. Now, Iowa is notoriously fickle. You'll recall that very rarely has the Iowa caucus winner actually been the person who went on to win the nomination. In fact, the last time that an Iowa caucus winner in the Republican Party went on to win the nomination was 2000, when George W. Bush narrowly defeated Steve Forbes 41-31. In 2012, it was Rick Santorum, who of course was not the nominee. In 2016, it was Ted Cruz, who of course was not the nominee. So, what happens in Iowa? Trump is more vulnerable in Iowa, but it's not going to be enough for anyone to defeat him in Iowa. Maybe that creates the impression that the God bleeds a little bit, but that's really not where all of the heavy lifting is going to be done. The same thing, by the way, is true in New Hampshire. So New Hampshire also has a spotty history of actually nominating presidents. So in 1996, Pat Buchanan, you'll remember, won the New Hampshire primary, and he didn't end up winning the nomination. Bob Dole ended up winning the nomination. In 2000, John McCain won the New Hampshire primary, throwing a scare into George W. Bush. In 2008, McCain, who's very popular in New Hampshire, won. Mitt Romney did win in 2012, and Trump won in 2016, but it's a bit of a spotty record in New Hampshire. If somebody wins Iowa and New Hampshire, that's going to throw a scare into Donald Trump. But really, Trump's last stand, if he were to show any vulnerability, and right now this is all speculative considering he's leading by leaps and bounds in both of those states, would be South Carolina. South Carolina has been entirely predictive of the Republican nominee every year but 2012. So in 2008, it was McCain. In 2000, it was George W. Bush. In 96, it was Dole. In 1988, it was George H.W. Bush. In 1980, it was Reagan. So again, right now, it's kind of a moot point because Trump is leading in all of those states. With that said, if he is going to show vulnerability, obviously the place you're going to first see it, not only in terms of calendars, but in terms of polls, is going to be Iowa, where other candidates are spending an awful lot of time. Are you tired of the lies and the twists of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Facts, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.